If you look at the old history of Bangalore, it was always a city of migrants. It was always composed in a sort of equal amounts of Kannada, Telugu, Tamil and people speaking than other languages. So it's always been a city which is a very hospitable and a welcoming city where people have come in and then made it their own.
There are inscriptions from the 10th century in Tamil, from the 14th century in Telugu. What we think of today as a cosmopolitan city, nature of this Bangalore, is not cosmopolitan today.
It's the one city that I've grown up in, and the more I do my research in, though I get anguished in many ways on how the city is playing out, but the more I do research in Bangalore, the more I fall in love with my city. And so if you look at old inscriptions from this area, they will talk about a very beautiful landscape where they talk about the lake, the wetlands below the lake, the drylands above the lake, the trees above and the wells below. So that was pretty much the landscape of Bangalore till I would say the time that Kempe Gowda came in. Then the British take over Bangalore and they continue this tradition of creating lakes and planting trees till the end of the 19th century. If you talk to the old residents that live there, they will all tell you that it was treeless and barren. And then the people will tell you stories that they and their kids and grandkids used to go out in the summer with buckets and mugs and water all of these trees. So that's the history of Bangalore. It is a place which was not very hospitable to nature in terms of just not having the rainfall to support it. But it's a place where each time people came to new areas, they actually improved the quality of nature from a human perspective.
We are so focused on our day-to-day survival. We really don't care for heritage in a big way. We are religious, yes, we don't mind going to a temple, praying and asking for good stuff, but heritage is not what we take ownership for. So we are losing these inscriptions, and these inscriptions are fundamentally records of significant events that have happened in the past in that location. They narrate to us the history of our city, and more importantly, they narrate to us the history of our localities.
Bangalore has been the IT center of the boom, has been a plus in terms of economical response, but we are paying the price in other ways in terms of our quality of life, in terms of our environment. I realize that our children and even some of our adults are so used to urban life that nature to them just is a collection of pots in their balcony, and even that is something they do not want even insects to be on the plant.
Similarly, for trees, you find that from the late 1990s, instead of planting trees, the government decides to chop down a lot of trees for all this infrastructure expansion, because Bangalore becomes a city focused on a particular ideology of growth. Often when we talk about a city and nature in the Indian context, we say, oh, it's hopeless, cities have to grow and nature is going to degrade. Clearly that's not the case, and clearly originally people when they came in knew that they had to survive and thrive in the city, so they needed to improve the quality of nature. I think it's a time of great promise for Bangalore. There are a few movements, definitely much smaller than the scale that we need, but they're growing and they're networking and they're learning from each other.
I still remember coming back from Delhi and talking to a friend of mine saying, what do we do and this is crazy, this is going to destroy all we know. And all that came to me was, this Paul Fernandez book of Bangalore swinging in the 60s. And I was wondering to myself, I said, how much of this Bangalore is going to remain? And so when I came back, I set out a Facebook post with a link to the Bangalore Mirror article which talked about the steel flyover coming back. And I remember saying, we have to come together, we have to do something. This cannot happen because this is going to ruin all the bits of Bangalore that we hold precious.
The beautiful old trees. I mean, going for a walk in Jayanagar in the mornings along the Nanda Talkies Road with the Rose Garden and all the parks there, or going to M.N. Krishnarao Park in Baswangudi, or going to Kaban Park in Lal Bagh. Lal Bagh used to have deer, so we used to feed them in the 1980s, yeah. And it was so beautiful. That entire experience of walking through these areas is really, something amazing.
It will disappear, or it may disappear due to apathy and ignorance. Whereas I find that generally when I take people out and they see the beauty of a bird or a tree, when they are interested, they realize that this is a part of their life, and then they do take some steps to not let it disappear. My expert ornithologist friends tell me that bird population in Lal Bagh, for example, has come down by 70%. I have not been birding for that length of time, but certainly I find that to see certain birds which I could see within Lal Bagh, now I have to go further and further out of the city limits. We do not only need the kind of manicured greenery that we have in apartment complexes. We tend to keep our trees to 5 feet height, and then we tend to cut them down. No, we need these tall trees because they will attract the birds, they will attract the squirrels, they will attract a lot of insect life. So a whole ecosystem is formed within that.
In the 80s Bangalore, there were these rocks near Alsoor Lake, and when you drove past every morning, there was this woman who had cow dung that she would spread as cow dung patties on a rock. And then if you drove back again past the same area around 12 or 1 or 2, she would be removing them and then selling them. So this is a city which was so much built around the idea of cows and livestock and grazing and multiple uses. And that's a memory we seem to have now forgotten, though there are still cowards in different parts of the city, right? Bangalore is something to everybody. City is something for everybody. But I think there are other different kinds of urban commons thriving in Bangalore which represent a completely different kind of collective action. There are the very urbanized collectives, and there are the very old sort of traditional organic collectives that are part of Bangalore.
We have 1.5 times the population at Bombay, but we have nearly twice their vehicle strength. That's how badly Bangalore is structured on transport. So no wonder we are looking at only transporting vehicles, not people. We realized just how poorly conceived the steel flyover was, how unnecessary it was. The cost was huge. The cost not just in terms of the financial cost, but what you were losing in terms of heritage, in terms of trees, in terms of air. Getting 7 minutes earlier to the airport certainly did not justify this kind of loss to everybody. I knew so many people in Bangalore who were all connected. Somebody had the technical expertise, somebody else had the creative exposure. But the human chain, it was one of the biggest successes that Bangalore's ever had. The idea was not to create an event. The idea was to be able to express, I think, what was needed and what the collective voice of the city was. And from 5, 10, 15, 20, and in about 20 minutes, there were thousands and thousands of people lining the road. But we don't know where it came from. There were people of different ages and walks. And this lovely 2-year-old child who was sitting on the wall of Balabrui. And I remember looking at her and I said, if the steel flyover comes, the tree under which she's sitting, the wall of Balabrui, and the tree under which she's never going to grow up to see. And these were, I think, the moments that made us realize that we had something to fight for.